This week on Let's Talk Schools, we're diving into the fascinating history of Fulton County Schools. Join us as we uncover the remarkable journey of this district, from its early beginnings to its transformative impact on education. Hello, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Schools. I'm Mike Looney, the host of the show, and have the good fortune of being the superintendent here in Fulton County Schools. Today, we're going to be talking about something that lots of districts don't have, but we do. And that is we have our own archive, and we have two teaching museums. And today, we have our local experts on archiving and teaching museums here in Fulton County Schools. And I'll start with our museum curator, Gina Seville is with us today, and then Mike Santrock is here as the archivist in Fulton County Schools. So not a lot of school districts have the kinds of services and the kinds of supports that we have in Fulton County, particularly an archive and two teaching museums, not one, but two. So we're going to start with Mike. What do you do as the district's archivist?
Well, like you said, it's a very unique repository, and not all school systems have them. But we're fortunate to have a district that had some forethought to think about preserving their history. So basically, what I do is manage the collections, which chronicles the history of the school system going all the way back to 1871. You'll recall we just celebrated our sesquicentennial, very hard word to say, our 150-year anniversary. So we're coming up on close to 155 now. And our records contain board records that go all the way back to the very first board meeting. We also have hundreds of yearbooks, and we chronicle all the different schools that have been in our school system, whether they exist today or whether they exist in the past. So it's a wonderful collection for preserving our community's history. Really.
So it's primary source data. We have the real artifacts, the records from board meetings, I suppose. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And annuals or school yearbooks for the various schools that we've had over the 150 years.
EPA records. We have untold amount of photographs that just chronicle all the history, whether it's transportation, PE, academics, anything.
So how do people how do employees or students access these records?
Well, so what they would do is they would contact us directly. Our repository is open to the public as well, because these are public records. But what we've been doing is we've been leveraging a lot of these collections with our social studies department and our ELA department to create lessons out of these, like you said, primary sources. So we've got a lot of traction there. But a lot of times people they're putting together reunions for their school, or we're supporting other departments in our school system that might be observing their history and chronicling their own, past. So we're open for a lot of those different kind of uses. So yeah.
I have more questions, but I'm going to turn my attention to Gina. Gina, what do you do as the museum curator for our school district?
So the Teaching Museum's mission is to provide authentic and innovative resources for our schools. And so we do that through a lot of different ways, including performances, and workshops. We have, for instance, work with local theater groups like the Alliance Theater, Synchronicity Theater, Georgia Ensemble Theater, to book programs that might relate to English language arts for elementary kids or even middle school kids. And so those programs, teachers are able to prep their kids, maybe reading the book and doing looking at the literature in schools. And then they come into the Teaching Museum and actually see the live performance. So there's really it's a catalyst for learning, for what's happening and supporting what's happening in the classroom.
So you converted, I believe this is still the truth, you've converted, or your folks have converted, a classroom into a one-room schoolhouse, as they say,
Yes.
a replica.
Yes, so we have in both museum locations, so there's one in Roswell and one in Hateville. We have both the performance space, as I just mentioned, but we also have lots of exhibits and also replica rooms, such as a one-room schoolhouse. And for instance, with that one space, we have a program for second grade called Georgia's Beginnings. And we have a storyteller that comes in and talks to students about early inhabitants of Georgia, where they lived in the different regions of Georgia, and then tells their stories, including like the Creek and the Cherokee. And so it reinforces social studies and ELA curriculum for second grade. Plus, it's magical that there's this storyteller dressed up in character in this imaginative space. So kids really feel like they're in a one-room schoolhouse. We also have a log cabin at the North Museum. And then students leave that experience and then they go into one of our exhibit rooms. We have a Creek and Cherokee exhibit room that shows a Creek and Cherokee pottery. And then they make little clay pots that are inspired by the traditions of the Cherokee. So we try to give the kids something that's totally unique that they wouldn't be able to get from a textbook or from their teachers. Teachers are providing lots of great experiences already in schools, but this is really a unique opportunity to spark learning.
How do you align what the students can see and experience at one of the museums with what they're learning in their specific grade level or content area?
So we're part of the learning and teaching department. And so we work directly with the curriculum areas in creating programming. We also will partner with a school or a couple schools and pilot programs with them and get direct feedback from the grade level teachers that we're targeting and also the school administrators to let us know, are we on target? Do we need to change something? We've also surveyed teachers to get their input on like what they needs assessment to find out they need a little more help with social studies or science. We do that. Actually, those two subjects were what we hear from teachers often, that because they are so focused on ELA and math, that they don't always feel like they have enough support or kind of that sparkle they need to engage kids in social studies and science. So that is, while we do a lot of things with ELA, we also are putting a lot of our resources into bringing enhanced social studies and science
Right.
content.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute and talk
Okay.
about the traveling portion of the teaching music because y'all take it on the road, I understand.
Yes.
But Mike, I want to come back to you first. Sure. You're the archivist, and so you've seen and probably touched all of the archives in some form or fashion. What are some tidbits or some ahas that you've had? Somebody might be interested on, did you know that blank happened in Fulton County schools?
Okay, yeah, wow. There's a lot of them actually. You know, one of them, and we're right now coming to the end of Women's History Month, so I think it's apropos to bring up that Fulton County had the first female JROTC unit, which was started back in 1924 at what was then Fulton High School. If you can picture a high school right in the middle of downtown, it was the first one built by the district, and it inhabited 2 floors above a Salvation Army. So this drill team would actually conduct their drills in a vacant lot right in downtown Atlanta. So, but that's a source of pride having the first female JROTC. Um, the district also was one of the first in the country, definitely the first in the state to receive a grant through President Eisenhower's National Defense Education Act for implementing more STEM, in the classroom. This was coming in the late 50s, right when Sputnik
Right.
was in the air. So this was Eisenhower's answer to that, to bolster that education. So Fulton County received a grant and implemented that grant into what was TV teaching. It was a closed circuit television, and this was the predecessor to what is now our public TV, which was co-sponsored by Atlanta Public Schools and Fulton County. So there's a lot of moments like that that you can pull out of the archive. There's so many more, but those are the two that come to mind first.
Now, you mentioned Fulton County High School. At one point in time, we're obviously Fulton County, but there's also an Atlanta Public Schools. But at one time, there was just one entity, one school system. Is that right?
No, that's actually Atlanta Public Schools and Fulton were always independent each other.
Okay.
Which made that high school kind of unique in that it was situated right in the middle of APS system.
But it was Fulton.
But it was Fulton County School. But the two have always kind of partnered on a certain level. I know that there's been annexations throughout history when the city of Atlanta's been growing, so they've taken over some of Fulton County schools. So there's been always kind of this symbiotic relationship with the city of
I
Atlanta.
get asked that a lot is how do these two entities coexist? But they've always existed in tandem and
Yep, ever since
working together.
back in the days of Reconstruction when the school systems were established, yeah, they were both established about this.
Interesting. I know
Well,
you have tremendous. Go ahead, Gina. Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna just say, and then Fulton also, it grew as so the Atlanta city of Atlanta encroached on Fulton, but Fulton also, then expanded in the 1930s.
During the Great
We
Depression.
always he's I always look for him to correct my, my dates and everything, but they, incorporated Campbell County and,
Milton County.
Milton County, so that's how,
That's why we have that really unique shape
shape
Right.
of the
to
county.
Fulton.
Because annexations that happened during the Great Depression, yes.
It's interesting. So, Gina, I know that we have teaching museum on the road, or we take the museum to classrooms and schools across the district. I know our students can take field trips to the two museums,
Right.
but we also take the museum to them. Talk to us about that.
Okay, yeah. So we, as you said, we have these two locations with these really interesting replica rooms and exhibits, but some of our programs can travel to schools. So a lot of our, based on what the program is and what the school's looking for, schools can select their programming. And so some of those happen in the schools. Sometimes they call them school-based field trips. And the performer comes there, sets up, and then delivers the content there. We also have traveling trunks, and these are things that either we've created or we work with community partners. We have trunks from the Atlanta History Center, Kennesaw State University's museums, a lot of different. We have some from Georgia Tech seismic program, and these are all content that we worked with our curriculum department on to see what would be quality, what's needed in our classrooms, and so teachers can check them out for 2 weeks. We send them through school mail, and we love our school mail partners through the warehouse, and the school mail delivers them to the schools. Teachers use the trunks in their classrooms, put it all back in the trunk, and they send it back to the teaching museum for us to circulate to the next teacher.
Is there a refurbishment process that happens when the trunks return?
Yes, we have to go through them, and just make sure everything's back in its place, often refilling consumables. So a lot of the science trunks have different little solutions and things like that that we've got to fill back up. And sometimes we're cleaning things, to reset it to then send out again. So usually we have about a 4-day or so turnover time between the two, sending it out to the next school.
Right.
Um,
Well, obviously, the board at the time when they created the, the teaching museum and the archives had wonderful foresight so that we can look at yesterday, what happened yesterday, and in the context of what's happening today, and
Yeah.
get those hands-on experiences
yeah.
at the museum and get that interact with primary resources, which is absolutely incredible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mike, I have one more question for you. Y'all have been involved in the creation of a video, a documentary, I understand it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So we've been kind of studying about how our district went through this complex process of desegregation back in the late 1960s. And a lot of districts, especially in the South, were struggling with this. And what we have done is we've taken a look at some of the schools that existed back then, and we've actually come across one school that served a Black community in College Park. And this particular school was shuttered in favor of integration. And at the time, the students and the parents, the whole community, kind of rallied around this school because in 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 reality, they had been fighting for generations for a nice school, a good facility, and they'd finally gotten one by the mid 1960s, only to have it closed 5 years later. So the documentary really features that community and some events in the late summer of 1969 when it was shut down. They conducted some sit-ins, some protests. So really, the documentary is as much about civic participation and how students, engage in their own community. But it's in that lens through the very complicated process of how schools were integrating back then. So, and of course, Fulton, went through that complex process just like any other district. So the documentary is really about this one community of College Park and how it struggled with that.
Fascinating. So How would students or educators or even the public access this documentary?
So you can find link to it on our department page. We have a museum and an archive page, which are interconnected. So you would just go on to fultonschools.org and look at find our department archives or teaching museum, and find the exhibits page where you could access that particular film.
Fascinating. I can't wait to look at it myself. Once again, thank you. Go ahead, Gina.
Well, I was going to say one note just for people interested in education, and I think Fulton County in particular, and teachers, is if you watch the video, the importance of education and the importance of their teachers. This group of alumni who are now in their 60s and 70s talking about their love for their school and how impactful their teachers were is pretty amazing.
It's really interesting to talk to people that lived through some of those trying
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
Wow. Once again, thank you both for joining, and thank you for watching another edition of Let's Talk Schools. And now, let's go around the district in 90 seconds. That's it for our show this week. Let's keep this conversation going. We'd love to hear from you on our social media platforms. Join us next time on Let's Talk Schools, and as always, thank you for watching.